What Candace Owens is doing is incredibly dangerous and honestly very disrespectful to Charlie Kirk's legacy.
What happens when the most controversial conservative in America turns on her own allies? Clashes with Ben Shapiro, survives getting fired, and then uses Charlie Kirk's death to fuel her rise. This is the untold story of Candace Owens, and why she might be the most unstoppable voice on the right today. By early 2021, Candace Owens had already carved out a name for herself as one of the rising voices on the American conservative stage. That momentum only accelerated when she joined The Daily Wire in March of that year, launching her first show under the company's banner. At first, the partnership seemed like a perfect fit. The outlet, co-founded by Ben Shapiro, leaned heavily into conservative commentary and held firm support for Israel and outlook Owens initially shared. But over time, her stance began to shift. Owens moved from a generally supportive position on Israel to becoming openly critical of its actions in Gaza. She also voiced opposition to U.S. financial aid in the region, a position that quickly brought her into direct conflict with Shapiro. Their disagreements, once private, eventually spilled out into public view. The tension came to a head with her now infamous God or Money post. Quoting scripture, Owens wrote that no one can serve two masters, implying that some in her own professional circle cared more about financial gain than about faith or truth. For her largely Christian audience, this message resonated as a moral stand-but for Shapiro. It struck a personal nerve. His response was pointed. If Owens believed her work at the Daily Wire conflicted with her devotion to God, she was welcome to walk away. In the end, the partnership proved unsustainable. By March 2024, Owens was dismissed from The Daily Wire. What had once been a promising collaboration unraveled under the weight of clashing convictions, very public disputes, and a widening divide between personal faith and political loyalty.
You've shaped out to be so awesome, and it's such a cool perspective that people could come and learn from you. And also, I just felt from observing both of you guys that have different mindsets, you guys had a beautiful opportunity to share one platform with two different mindsets. She has her own views and I have my own views, but I'm not going to remove somebody from their position of what
In a later interview, Ben Shapiro reflected on the fallout from Candace Owens' departure. The exchange was more than just a passing comment. It was a window into how he saw both his role as a media executive and the ideological boundaries of The Daily Wire. The interviewer suggested that Owens' tenure at the company represented something rare within the conservative media ecosystem, a genuine diversity of thought. On one side, Owens had been openly critical of Israel, raising questions about its treatment of Palestinians and about the United States. Continued financial support for the Israeli government. On the other, Shapiro remained one of the most visible defenders of Israel, unwavering in his belief that conservative principles aligned with strong U.S.-Israeli ties. Together, the two represented clashing perspectives that could, in theory, coexist under the same media umbrella. The idea was compelling. In a landscape where accusations of echo chambers are common, The Daily Wire had the opportunity to showcase internal debate in real time. Supporters of this vision argued that it could make the platform stronger, more credible, and more appealing to audiences tired of partisan media that never tolerates dissent. In this framing, Owens' presence was not a liability but an asset, a demonstration that conservatives could disagree without fracturing. But when pressed on the matter, Shapiro's response made it clear he saw things differently. He explained bluntly that if someone joined The Daily Wire with a pro-Israel stance and then shifted into open opposition, he was under no obligation to continue paying them. To Shapiro, it wasn't about providing a forum for competing ideas. It was about loyalty, consistency, and the integrity of the brand he had built. In other words, The Daily Wire was never meant to be a debate club. It was a platform with a clear ideological foundation, and deviation from that foundation was unacceptable. This position sheds light on a larger tension within modern conservative media. For years, outlets like The Daily Wire, Fox News, and others have claimed to champion free speech and robust debate. Yet, in practice, those debates often have strict limits. Certain positions, especially those related to Israel, U.S. foreign policy, or the core values of the movement's leadership, are treated as non-negotiable. Owens' evolution on the Israel question pushed directly against those boundaries. Her increasingly sharp critiques of Israel's actions in Gaza clashed not just with Shapiro's views but with the company's financial and cultural positioning. It's worth pausing here to consider why this clash became so explosive. On the surface, it was about one commentator's shift in perspective, but at a deeper level, it reflected the challenges of balancing ideological purity with audience diversity in an age of personality-driven media. Owens brought in a particular audience, young, Christian, often skeptical of foreign entanglements, who resonated with her willingness to question sacred cows. For them, her break with Shapiro wasn't betrayal, it was authenticity. But for Shapiro and the leadership of the Daily Wire, her stance risked alienating key allies, funders, and segments of the conservative movement, who view unwavering support for Israel as a litmus test. The conflict also exposed the personal dynamics at play. Shapiro's pointed remarks carried a tone of finality. His message was essentially, if you think your conscience demands you reject this company's stance, then leave. That framing positioned him as the guardian of the company's mission and cast Owens as someone unwilling or unable to align herself with it. It was a moment that highlighted how, in today's media landscape, professional disagreements often double as personal rifts. Critics of Shapiro's position argued that he missed a historic opportunity by forcing Owens out rather than letting her dissent coexist with his own perspective. He reinforced the stereotype that partisan media cannot tolerate internal disagreement. Supporters, however, saw his stance as principled leadership. To them, allowing Owens to remain while attacking Israel would be like inviting someone into your home only to have them undermine its very foundation. A company built partly on defending Israel, they argued, couldn't credibly keep paying a host who positioned herself as one of its critics. The fallout extended beyond the walls of the Daily Wire. For many viewers, the dispute symbolized broader fractures within the conservative movement. On one side stood the traditional conservatives, often older, more institutionally connected, and staunchly on the other side were younger, more populist, conservatives, many of whom leaned heavily on religious identity and saw U.S. foreign aid as a betrayal of America First principles. Owens became a symbol of this emerging wing, while Shapiro embodied the older guard. Their clash wasn't just about one company. It was about the future of the conservative coalition. The irony is that both sides claimed to represent authentic conservatism. Shapiro pointed to historical alliances, moral commitments, and shared democratic values between the U.S. and Israel. Owens invoked biblical principles and a moral obligation to prioritize truth over political convenience. Each framed themselves as standing on principle, even as those principles collided. Looking back, the interview where Shapiro articulated his stance reads almost like a manifesto for how he sees the role of media companies in ideological movements. He was not interested in cultivating a platform for disagreement within his own ranks. He was interested in advancing a coherent vision. For Shapiro, clarity mattered more than pluralism. For Owens, independence mattered more than loyalty. The story doesn't end there, of course. Owens went on to build one of the most successful independent podcasts on the right, proving that audiences were hungry for her brand of unfiltered commentary. Meanwhile, Shapiro doubled down on his role as a defender of pro-Israel conservatism. Each has thrived in their own lane, but the rupture between them serves as a case study in how ideological movements fracture under the weight of competing priorities. The lesson for audiences is sobering. Media companies, no matter how much they claim to value free speech, ultimately operate within boundaries set by leadership. When those boundaries are crossed, consequences follow. Owens crossed one of those boundaries, and Shapiro enforced the rules. It may have been pragmatic from his perspective, but it also highlighted just how fragile the promise of open debate really is when core values collide with divergent voices. And perhaps that is the real takeaway from Shapiro's comments. The Daily Wire was never going to be an open marketplace of conservative ideas. It was, and remains, a platform with specific commitments and red lines. Those who align with them will find a home. Those who don't will find themselves on the outside. Candace Owens learned that lesson the hard way, but in doing so, she also discovered the power of building a platform where the only boundary is her own conviction.
Need to pay everybody, no matter how widely variant their views. If you show up and I hire you and you say, I'm a pro-life person, and then the next day you come out and you say, abortion up till point of birth is a moral virtue. Do I have a moral obligation to continue paying you to be on the platform? I think absolutely not. We are a self-stated company with a
When asked about Owens' dismissal, Ben Shapiro didn't mince words. His stance was blunt. If someone joined the Daily Wire with a pro-Israel perspective and later reversed their position, he had no obligation to keep them on payroll. To Shapiro, it wasn't just about differences of opinion. It was about protecting the values and relationships that kept his platform afloat. In short, he wasn't going to pay someone to undermine him on his own stage at the time. Many thought Candace Owens' career had reached a dead end. For a black conservative who openly clashed with her own allies, the assumption was that doors would close permanently, but the prediction couldn't have been more wrong. By June 2024, Owens had reinvented herself with a brand new podcast and it exploded in popularity. Within its debut year, the show soared to the #2 spot among new podcasts, drawing in a massive weekly audience. Free from the guardrails of the Daily Wire, she leaned into a message that resonated deeply with Christians and segments of the moderate right, many of whom felt their skepticism of Israel was being stifled by mainstream conservative outlets. Owens' independence brought her more than just listeners, it reignited her relevance. She attracted attention across social media, sparked heated controversies, and created rifts with former allies. In many ways, her firing had become the very catalyst that propelled her to new heights.
Why is it that Candace Owens will interview Harvey Weinstein before she'll talk to me? Am I really that bad? People said when Candace Owens split with Daily Wire, people begged her to do a collaboration with me.
By mid-2024, Candace Owens' influence was undeniable. Even figures like Nick Fuentes, who rarely get invited to major platforms, were eager to appear on her show, proof of just how much attention she commanded. Owens had criticized Trump, taken aim at Israel, and clashed with conservative elites, yet she still managed to thrive as one of the most watched personalities on the right. Her podcast wasn't just surviving, it was dominating, often topping the charts in viewership. But controversy soon followed. After the sudden death of Charlie Kirk, Owens began discussing him repeatedly on her show. Many felt she was exploiting the tragedy for attention, fueling conspiracy theories rather than giving Kirk's family the space to grieve. His pastor, Rob McCoy, even took to Instagram with a heartfelt rebuke. He reminded the world that Kirk had never spoken poorly of Owens, even when they disagreed, and urged her to be the kind of friend to Kirk in death that he had been to her in life. Quoting Proverbs, McCoy's message was clear: true friendship demands compassion, not self-promotion. Criticism didn't stop there. Despite her massive live audiences sometimes drawing 400,000 people at once, voices like Patrick Bet-David and others warned that popularity didn't necessarily equal truth. They accused Owens of spreading claims she couldn't substantiate, stirring up unnecessary hostility, and exploiting grief. Actor Michael Rappaport went even further, blasting her publicly with fiery language. Frustrated by her unrelenting commentary less than a week after Kirk's death. Yet Owens' resilience was undeniable. After her high-profile split from the Daily Wire, many expected her career to collapse. Instead, she grew stronger, largely because her base was not rooted in Jewish conservatism but in a predominantly Christian audience that continued to rally behind her. In this environment, Owens became untouchable. Even other conservative influencers, like Brandon Tatum, knew better than to openly oppose her doing so could cost them their own careers. Despite the criticism, Owens had solidified her place as one of the most powerful voices in conservative media. She proved she could not only survive cancellation attempts, but turn them into fuel for even greater influence.
Mr. Michael Rappaport. Mr. Michael Rappaport. Please don't get the Chappelle. Please don't get Chappelle, because we will Chappelle you. Look up what Chappelle mean. When you talking about Miss Candace Owens, the internet black queen, the internet black wife, you will not talk about Candace Owens and call her B-I-T-C-H.
And this.
Listen, Mr. Michael Rappaport, I heard what you said about Candace Owens, and I'm just going to say this as a black man, right? Because I don't agree with a lot of the things Candace says, and I don't know Candace. But I want you to know that when you speak on a black woman, the way you just spoke on her and called her out of her name so many times and referred to her as a dog, that's how you get all the teeth in your face.
What's striking now is the number of black men who openly defend Candace Owens, even some calling her a black queen, despite her often harsh critiques of the black community on YouTube. They may not agree with everything she says, but they stand firmly behind her right to speak freely. That kind of support has put Israel in an unexpectedly difficult position. Figures like Owens, and even Tucker Carlson, have forced leaders such as Benjamin Netanyahu to engage far more publicly than before. Once pro-Israel sentiment on the right was almost automatic, now, the debate has become messy enough that Netanyahu himself has been appearing on YouTube channels, while Israel invests in influencers and even explores controlling platforms like TikTok to shape narratives. The point is clear. Owens has proven far more resilient than her critics imagined. Any attempt to silence her, whether by demonetization, deplatforming, or outright bans, would likely backfire. We've seen this play out before. Nick Fuentes, once banned across mainstream platforms, rebuilt his audience on Rumble and now commands enough influence to appear in the New York Times. Removing someone from YouTube doesn't erase their presence. It only drives them to alternative platforms where their supporters follow with even greater loyalty. Candace Owens embodies that principle of resilience more than almost anyone else in today's media landscape. What was once thought to be her downfall, her firing from the Daily Wire, turned out to be the catalyst that propelled her into an even stronger position. Far from being cancelled, Owens has proven nearly untouchable. Her political rivals, who once anticipated her downfall, have found themselves unable to derail her. Benjamin Netanyahu, the leader of Israel and a longtime figure of respect among American conservatives, cannot silence her critiques without amplifying them further. Other conservative commentators, like Brandon Tatum, are careful not to confront her head-on, aware that her audience and influence vastly outweigh their own. Even when public figures outside conservative politics, actors like Michael Rappaport or critics from the mainstream press lash out at her, the attacks have little effect. Owens not only survives the criticism, she often uses it as fuel to reinforce her narrative that powerful forces are trying, and failing, to silence her. This resilience highlights a fundamental shift in the nature of influence in the digital age. Traditional gatekeepers, legacy media, political institutions, and even large platforms like the Daily Wire no longer have the same power to determine whose voice matters. Instead, influence is driven by direct connection to audiences, often built on trust, authenticity, and a willingness to say the unsayable. Owens has mastered this model. Her unapologetic stance on controversial issues, particularly her critiques of Israel and American foreign aid, have not alienated her base. In fact, they've strengthened it, precisely because she appears fearless in confronting taboos others avoid. The reality is that Owens has emerged as the most powerful independent influencer on the right today. Unlike traditional commentators who rely on established media outlets, she commands her own ecosystem, her podcast, social media channels, and live platforms, all of which reach millions daily. This independence insulates her from institutional control. She doesn't need approval from executives, advertisers, or donors in the same way that network personalities do. Instead, she draws her power directly from her audience, who view her as someone willing to take risks and say what others will not. Love her or loathe her, Owens has proven herself non-consolable. That word has become almost cliché in the political arena, but in her case, it carries genuine weight. She has faced the exact scenarios that were supposed to end her career: high-profile firings, public spats with influential conservatives, backlash from Jewish organizations, and condemnation from mainstream media figures. Yet every time, her reach has grown. She has demonstrated an ability to turn controversy into currency, transforming criticism into proof of her authenticity and cementing loyalty among her followers. Her rise also reflects deeper cultural and political currents. Many on the right, especially within Christian and populist circles, feel alienated from establishment conservatism, which they view as overly compromised or beholden to foreign interests. Owens' rhetoric taps into this sentiment perfectly. By presenting herself as an independent truth-teller willing to defy not only the left but also her own political allies, she fills a space that others have been unwilling or unable to occupy. The scale of her influence is staggering. Her live streams regularly draw audiences in the hundreds of thousands. Her podcast, launched in 2024, rapidly became one of the most listened to shows on the right, often ranking in the top tier of political podcasts overall. She generates millions of views across multiple platforms daily, and her name consistently trends on social media whenever she wades into a new controversy. These numbers aren't just vanity metrics, they translate into real cultural and political influence. Lawmakers, pundits, and even world leaders are forced to respond to narratives she sets in motion. This dynamic raises important questions about the future of conservative media. If Owens represents the next generation of right-wing influence, decentralized, independent, and audience-driven, then traditional outlets, like the Daily Wire, face a new reality. They can no longer assume that hosting big names guarantees loyalty or control. Audiences are increasingly willing to follow personalities across platforms, even to alternative ecosystems like Rumble or independent subscription services. Owens' success demonstrates that charismatic individuals, not institutions, are now the true engines of influence. Of course, there are risks to this model. Owens' critics argue that her independence also frees her from accountability. Without the editorial oversight of a larger institution, she is free to amplify unverified claims or speculative narratives, some of which her detractors describe as conspiratorial. Yet, paradoxically, this freedom is precisely what her audience values. For them, the lack of institutional filters is a feature, not a bug. It signals honesty, courage, and transparency, qualities they feel are missing in mainstream media. Owens' trajectory also underscores the limitations of cancellation as a strategy. Attempts to silence high-profile figures often backfire in the digital age, driving audiences toward them with even greater intensity. Owens herself illustrates this pattern vividly. Her dismissal from the Daily Wire was supposed to marginalize her. Instead, it transformed her into a symbol of resistance, fueling her growth into the most powerful independent voice on the right. Whether one sees this as positive or dangerous depends largely on one's perspective. To her supporters, Owens is a warrior for truth, a fearless Christian conservative willing to sacrifice comfort for conviction. To her critics, she is opportunistic, divisive, and reckless with her platform. But regardless of the lens through which she is viewed, one fact is indisputable: Candace Owens has become an unstoppable force in American media. Her platform not only continues to grow stronger, it has redefined what it means to be influential in the digital age. She is proof that independence, authenticity, and a loyal audience can outweigh institutional backing. And as long as she maintains that formula, Candace Owens will remain a dominant voice on the right, immune to the forces that have silenced so many others.